for this very comfortable little spot we have here. My name is Alejandro Morales. I was born in Montebello, California, and I want to tell you a couple of stories. One is a little bit about my mother and father, where I lived, and how I got started writing. That's the issue here. Or this whole week we've been celebrating writing. So I'd like to talk about how I got started, or actually when. Yes. All right. Okay. As I was saying, so I want to start, talking about myself and where I grew up, where I went to school, et cetera, et cetera. And also talk about the barrio I lived in, which really has a lot to do with many of my books. The other thing I want to talk about is the idea of when I thought I was a writer, or when I thought I was going to be a writer, or even if I wanted to be a writer, et cetera. And but anyway, I was born in Montebello, California, as I said earlier. My mother and father are immigrants from Mexico, from central Mexico, Guanajuato. And my dad came, I think, in 1905, and my mother came in 1912. And they went directly to a place called Simon's Town. Hola, buenas tardes, adelante, por favor. They went directly to a little town called Simon's Simon's Town, no, but it was actually a company town for the Simon's Brickyard. And the Simon's Brickyard in the 1930s or so was considered. Hola, come on in. Yeah, we started. Thank you for coming. Gupale. So, so again, it was considered the largest brickyard in the world. It was producing, and it was located in South Montebello, right, just beyond the city of Montebello, how do you say, borders, because they didn't want to put it in, have it built in Montebello, because basically there was really negative feelings towards Mexicans, because Mexicans were 95 to 100% of the labor there. So when my dad came over and when my mother came over, they already had family working at Simon's. So they had a support system. And so they were greeted there. The men were guaranteed jobs. So my dad worked there for a long time, and he he was also one of the things about my father was that he was a notorious gambler. So that was his second job in a sense. He really, but he did very well. He would win, and so forth. But he always discouraged me from even playing poker. We would get together in Christmas time, and all the men would get together, and I wanted to jump in. He said, "De ninguna manera, deja esto, por favor." So that's what he says. That don't even think about it. Just leave this alone, or leave us alone. But anyway, Simon's Brickyard, again, all that brick was used to build all the major cities or major buildings in the city of Montebello. It was used to build buildings in Pasadena and San Diego, et cetera, et cetera. After the 1905 earthquake that destroyed um, San Francisco, millions of bricks were railroaded up there to rebuild the city. So it wasn't until 1933, right, the Long Beach earthquake, that contractors and architects finally understood we can't build with brick in a seismic area, right? So that's what happened. So, but Simon still hung in there. I mean, he still was producing bricks. About 1953, Mr. Simons passed away. The wife and their daughters didn't want anything to do with the brickyard, so they sold it. So that meant that all of the workers had to find jobs and had to find a place to live. So what happened was that they basically went up the barranca. They went into Montebello, because there was this big kind of a barranca that separated Montebello and Simon's property. Because Simon's was kind of in a deep hole, kind of, right? But My dad went up there right away, bought a lot, and he organized more workers to come, and they bought lots, and they built our house. A two-bedroom little house, which where we all grew up, and we had they had my parents had about what is it? Well, the oldest was what it was Josefina, Josie, Carlos, Richard, Eleanor, and myself, right? So that's where we grew up, and then we went to where did we go to school? We went to the Mexican school. Vale Elementary School was the Maribel Unified School District, totally segregated Mexican school. I think we only had one Anglo fellow there, right? And he was the only one. He lived on Vale Street, and his dad was one of the workers there, I think a mechanic. But we used to make a lot of fun at him. No, it was just terrible. His name was Tony. I think the little song we had from him was Tony Boloni, calzón colorado, salta para arriba y cae encuerado. So that was a little song we sang for him, right? But well, after that, uh, my my dad, I grew up there. I went to Oh, sorry. I grew up there. I went to Vale Elementary School. That was the school I went to. Mrs. Miranda was our kindergarten teacher, and she slowly, attempted to transition us away from Spanish and into English. So slowly, I began to lose my Spanish words. We can talk about that, whether you consider people bilingual or interlingual, and so on. But that's a really good subject to talk about afterwards in the Q&A. But I still speak Spanish, but I don't speak Spanish as well as a Mexicano who grows up in Mexico, or Chileno or whatever, and that's the nature, I think, of a lot of. You talked about labels that we use, right? I'll use the label Latinx people, right? They're coming from different Spanish-speaking countries. Many of them, their children, lose the language because they start going to school, and that's where I basically lost most of my Spanish. And that was why when I went to East Los Angeles College, I studied Spanish. When I went to Cal State LA, I studied Spanish, and I graduated with a degree in Spanish, and then I went I got a credential for high school, and I ended up getting a job at Claremont High School, right? Which and then at the same time trying to go back to Cal State LA to get a master's. So, but I want to also focus on, because it has to do with my first novel. I want to focus on the life in Simons, and that's when the brickyard was gone, and we became this barrio. Now we were Simon's barrio, and then for Anglo American people, they didn't like us. We were too close to their homes, too close to their school, and that was basically the first time in the third grade we were transferred over to Greenville Elementary, and that's the first time I really had met Anglo kids. I never played with them other than Tony Calzón Colorado, right? But nonetheless, we ended up going to school there, and those kids became our friends because we also went through junior high school with them, and we also went to Montebello High School with them. But I want to talk a little bit about the negative side of the barrio. Uh, we were comfortable in the barrio. I loved that barrio, right? I wrote about that barrio, and I was happy with the people. But there was also in the 60s, in the 50s, 60s, and so on, there were a lot of issues that were really hurting the community there. One of them was alcoholism. You had a lot of, in a sense, borrachos, that who had families there, but they became alcoholics, and they ended up in the streets. They ended up living in lots, in abandoned cars, and trying to find food in the dump, et cetera, et cetera. But always drinking, always drinking. And those are the fathers and mothers. There were some women, not many, but the parents of the kids that I went to school with. The other thing was drugs, and there was a plague of heroin in the barrio at that time. And we were not the only barrio who was going through this, right? But and heroin killed a lot of kids, and a lot of young people, as well as a lot of older people. But that's kind of the negative side of the barrio. It was still for us home, right? And no matter what, we defended it, we loved it. I mean, that's it. And that was where we lived. So I went on. From there, I went on to, eventually I taught high school, right? From graduating from Cal State LA, got my credential, and I taught high school at Claremont. And then there was I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do afterwards. And by then I had met at Sioux Elementary School, I met the boss, Rhoda, right? And I met her in kind of a funny way because that time my job while going to school was going to East LA or Cal State LA was I was the at her school. She was at Sioux Elementary, and I was the afternoon or after school playground director. And so one day I was late for work, and she was in there. What is it? Mimeographing papers and so forth. She had the papers, and I was barreling in there to punch in, and wham! I ran into her. Papers all over the damn place, and and she looked at me, and I have to pick up the paper, but she was really quite angry about that. But I kept going, and I looked at her and said, I want to meet this girl. But anyway, we met, and we eventually got married and had 2 kids. And Greg did very, very well, and Alessandra is doing very, very well. So, but I was still trying to get my master's, and I was falling asleep in class while at Claremont, I was trying to teach crazy kids Spanish. And one of the things that they wanted to know were all the bad words in Spanish. So I said, okay, write them in English for me, and we'll have a bad word day. And that was on Fridays. Every every Friday, they learned one bad word. They looked forward to that. They started paying attention because a first year teacher, I got all these really.
Did the boss know that?
What's that?
Did the boss know that?
I told him he thought it was a great idea. To be honest, he was an much older man, and he was really easy going. Oh, that boss. Oh, well, yeah, she knew it too. She thought it was a good idea. But anyway, so she we went ahead and decided to leave our jobs. Our parents didn't want us to go anywhere, right? But Rhoda says, "Why don't you apply to grad school?" And I said, grad school. Okay, I'm going to apply. And the plan was because her parents, Rhoda is from Rhode Island, and they had this magnificent house in Jamestown, Rhode Island. So anyways, we decided to go to Kingston, University of Rhode Island at Kingston. I applied there. I got in. I thought, oh, great. But they didn't have a PhD program, and I wanted a PhD. So we decided then to go to the school that gave us the most money. Because by then we had 2 kids. No, one. So you were pregnant. So Rutgers came through, and Rutgers gave us, housing, et cetera, at least at a real low rate. And I got a TA-ship, so I got paid. So we went to Rutgers. I graduated at Rutgers in 1975 officially when I finished my PhD. But before that, we came back to California, and I was writing my dissertation at the time. And uh, we came to California, but I had grants, and we were coming to California, but we were going to go south. We were going to go to Mexico, to El Centro de Estudios Literarios in La UNAM, where I studied, and I finished up my dissertation there. Uh, but we stayed in Mexico for about 9 months or so, and it was good. It wasn't as crowded as it was now. It wasn't as smoky as it is, and so forth. But it was a good place, and our kids went to, at least Gregory went to what is it, the nursery school. He had a girlfriend by the name of Palomita. so and then Alessandra was just growing. She was about 2 years old. Yeah, turning 2 years old. But to make now let me get to that one thing that I want to talk to you about that kind of changed my life. I did a stupid thing. Like none of you have done stupid things, but I did a major stupid thing. Okay. And that was, I was part of the guys. I was still hanging out with the guys in Simons and so forth. And we would go to the local bars. We had, I don't know how many bars in the neighborhood. And that's why people are alcoholic. We had all sorts of stores, and they were buying cheap trash that they would buy to them, to sell to them. But we went into a bar, a local bar, and we didn't like the owner, right? But so we went in anyway, and there was about 7 of us. And there was a lot of people in there also, and we wanted beers. But everybody except for me was 17, 16 years old, and we were running around like a bunch of locos, trying to find beer. So, so that's what happened. We ordered beer, and they said no. He said no, and all of a sudden, from all directions, it comes. Fists were flying, patadas were coming, bottles were being thrown everywhere, and then somebody grabbed me from my shoulder, and I turned around and I hit the fellow. And I wasn't a violent guy, but I hit him as hard as I could. It happened to be the owner, and I saw him just, and I smashed his nose and blood everywhere, and he just slid down the refrigerator door and like that. Boom, and never forget that image. So, and then we heard the cops, sirens are coming and so forth. Yeah.
I just want to give you more play on this court.
Okay. Oh yeah. Margarita's causing trouble again. So, okay. Thank you. So, so anyway, we could hear the cars, the police cars coming, and so everybody ran. We lived right in the middle. The bar was right in the middle of the barrio, so everybody ran home. I jumped in my car and I went to a friend's house. But then I started thinking what was going to happen next, right? So this fellow, uh, I hit him pretty hard and I broke his nose and so forth, and so he pressed charges against me for assault and battery. And I said, "Oh my God!" And I talked to some people and said, "Well, that could be a felony, because you could say you tried to kill him or something." And so that was a real problem. And I said, "Oh, gee whiz!" And then a week later, Montebello police show up and they arrested me and charged me with assault and battery. My brother and sisters and my brothers and my dad went to bail me out, and I had to wait to face the judge. Waited for about a month, and finally, they uh, they called me and said I had an appointment to see the judge. And then I walked in there, and this court was in East Los Angeles by by uh, by uh, by East LA College, in fact, right in that little park they had there. And what's that?
Belvedere Park.
Belvedere Park. And I didn't know who the judge was going to be. I hope I didn't get a, forgive me, an Anglo guy, because I usually get the short end of the stick or something. Because so I talked to this lawyer who was counseling us, right? And he said, just be polite and say yes, sir, Alejandro. That's all you got to do. Be polite and say yes, sir. Well, all these other guys were kind of rough and older men and younger guys, but they weren't behaving. So in 20 minutes, I was in front of Leopoldo Sanchez. That was the judge, right? Leopoldo Sanchez. And some of you might know the name. Look him up, because he was a real good guy to the Latino community, right? And so the guy, I remember what the lawyer said: be polite and say yes, sir. So then he asked me, Alejandro, are you Alejandro Morales? And I said, yes, sir. Right. And then he read the charges. Did you do this assault and battery and beat this guy up and break his nose? You know that I can send you away for a long time, right? I can even charge you with a felony, right? And I answered, yes, sir, and so forth. No, but then he says, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Um, uh, I have three recommendations from your professors at East LA College. That time I was going to East LA College, right? And so he said, and I see hope in you. So what we're going to do, and I know that you're going into midterms. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to send you away though. And I said, oh my God, what the hell's going to happen? I didn't want to go to jail, whatever. I didn't want to go to jail, And so he said, but I'm going to send you weekends. You're going to do weekends in the LA County Jail on Vigna Street. And I said, what? Oh, okay, well, it's better than going away for 3 years or whatever, right? Or 2 years in juvie. So that's what happened. I was sentenced to 12 weekends in jail. But he says, I know you're going into midterms, so I'm gonna. First of all, you're not gonna be, you won't have to strip. You're not gonna be cavity searched. You're not gonna be sprayed, right? You're just gonna go in a different entrance. You won't go through that entrance, right? So that's what happened. I ended up going, every weekend. My brother-in-law would pick me up, or Eleanor, my sister, would drive me to jail, to prison. And in Sunday, what is it? Friday at 3 o'clock. I had to be there right on time, and then I was released every Sunday at 3 o'clock. Right, but he allowed me also to take all my books to study for for my midterms, and he put me. I always had one cell, right? And so that was, but that has that, I served my time. The man sued me for $1,000. That was for a kid, was big, but I paid it off in 10 months. I was working, and but yet my family, my brothers and sisters, my mom and dad were away, and it was the whole gang ganged up on me. All my brothers and sisters said, we have to talk to you, and let's go in the living room. And my parents were gone at the time, and so what happened was that they wanted me out of the house. They said, you got to get the hell out of here. We get sick and tired of you. As my brothers were, as if my brothers are santitos. So so you got to get out of here. So I said, what do you mean? Where am I going to go? I said, well, find a place to go. And Richard, he tells me, why don't you talked about Oregon, University of Oregon. Why don't you apply to the University of Oregon for summer school and go up there? I did. I went to University of Oregon. I spent all summer there. I took, and I had two classes, one in Latin American literature, right, narrative, and another one in Spanish poetry. And that professor was Julian Pally. Remember his name, Julian Pally. By the way, Professor Maria Sobek is one of my colleagues, or was one of my colleagues at UC Irvine, but now she went away to UC Santa Barbara because they stole her from us. But anyway, but still, I met Julian Pally, and I'll never forget him. He was a great professor, right? So I went back home. I'm going to cut it short because you guys want to read some stuff, and I want to talk about my books too. Uh, so this thing that happened to me, and running into and having the judge Leopoldo Sanchez, kind of really give me a huge break, right? It got me, it affected me, and I started doing a lot better, right? We went to Rutgers, and I finished up the PhD, and on the way home, or actually we came home because at the time we were going to Mexico. We were driving down to San Diego to visit Rhoda's family down there, and we saw the sign UCI. I said, "What the hell is that?" And so we followed it, and it would happen to be the University of California, Irvine. I never didn't know it existed, it was a Saturday, and I walked up there and trying to find the Spanish department because I think that's where I fitted the best. And sure enough, Professor Villegas was there, and he was the chair of the department. It was a Saturday, and I walked in, knocked on the door, and walked in, and we talked, and I told him what I was doing and so forth, and he was very interested in my dissertation because I did kind of a rare dissertation. I wanted to be a medievalist, believe me, but the medievalists at UCI, at Rutgers discouraged me. You're crazy, he said. And so you should start doing this literature, the Chicano literature stuff. Write about that. So I did. I wrote my dissertation all about the history of that literature, starting in the 19th century all the way to the present time. But that's kind of a little bit about me, right? What I've done and so forth, and what got me, what I read about my barrio was actually that helped me write my very first book, which is where is it? Yeah, the Brick People. No, Caras Viejas y Vino Nuevo. It was
Yeah, the big
Brick
people
People's
there.
there. Yeah, it was. This is the first one. This is the first book I wrote. I started writing actually when I was in junior high school. When I was in junior high school, no, and into high school, and I just kept writing. And I guess all I wanted to do was fill 1 inch of the library. 1 inch of the library. That's all I wanted. And lo and behold, I published, I don't know, about 12 books, 13, 14 books, or something like that. And I have some books I haven't published at all yet. One's coming out in October the 14th, The Place of the White Heron. Beautiful book. But this book has to do with that ugly side of the barrio, written all in Spanish, and I sent it off to different publishers. Nobody wanted to touch it because it's Spanish. And then Quinto Sol came around, and they were publishing Tomas Rivera, what is it, Hinojosa, and other Chicano writers, but they were publishing very sweet stories, or difficulties, labor difficulties, etc. Mine was a terrible view of the Simons Barrio. They rejected it, and why they rejected it? Because he says I can't sell this. The guy said, It,
Quinto Sol rejected it.
yeah, he rejected it, and mainly because you can't sell it in high school. This thing would not be allowed in high school and so forth. But that's but the story is it's got real good reviews. My second book was Death of an Anglo, and this idea came. That was based on my experience in the valley, right, my home. This idea came from an article that a friend of ours at Rutgers handed me this article called Death of an Anglo, and it's about a fellow by the name of no, I can't remember his name now, but a doctor who went in Corpus Christi. He went to Mathis, Texas. He was an Anglo doctor. He went to school in Guadalajara, became a doctor, right? And so he spoke Spanish. Well, yeah, Logan. That's his name. But he was, he set up shop in Mathis, Texas. It was a real racy, race, a type of a place. It was anti Mexican and so forth. But he set up shop, and so that article was my sort of road to write the whole book, right? And this book has a history. I believe, all books create their own history. In this book, I was invited to go to Corpus Christi for a conference, and then I rented a car and I went to Mathis, Texas. And I actually met some of the people that I created here. And one of his nurses was Maria, and I didn't know she existed. And I met her. I met her there. Right, I met her there, and she taught. I was looking for his grave because once he was killed, this guy was killed by the sheriff, Eric Bunch, that didn't like what he was doing and so forth. He also got a big grant from the what's a medical outfit in DC that allowed him to build a migrant workers clinic, and that's what people really upset people. So that book is has a history, but it's haunted me. The,
What years?
what year was it published?
Yeah, or was the base story?
Uh, in the 70s. Yeah, in the 70s. So we were still in Rutgers when it or 60s. Yeah, but I think okay, all right. It says early 70s. Yeah. So let's see what other one. The other book that has a story, very quickly here, is Reto en Paraíso. This, after finishing the first book and the second book, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to find my characters. So another colleague of ours, Richard Barrutia, came in there and gave me a history of the Irvine Company. I said, the Irvine Company. And I read that little history that he had. It wasn't a long book. And I started creating, probably in this book, there are so many characters, just a tremendous amount of characters. But I give you the history of the Irvine Company. And also there was a professor named Luis Leal. At the time at a conference, he says, Alejandro, I think you've written the best Chicano book thus far. Right? And that was a long time ago, but still it made a lot of difference to me. But it was translated by one of the Spanish novelists that we had invited to Irvine, and he decided to translate all. It's totally bilingual. In other words, the narrative is in Spanish. The people who speak English speak English. Those who speak Spanish. Completely bilingual. So he translated all of it into Spanish. There's also a French person that we knew at Irvine, and she did a French translation, right? And that's
Of the same book?
on the same book, right? But never got published. But still, if you want to read the manuscript, it's at Stanford, right? So, a couple of things more. This book here, I think, the Brick People is about the Brick People. Actually, it's a history of the Brick People. That is the story of my family. It's a biographical, based on us family. Excuse me, book, right? Story, and I think that's an excellent. People really like that book. It's a book of immigration. It carries all the details of immigration, and so forth. So it's done very well as well. Also, um, let's see, Ragdoll Plagues. It's about disease. The first part of the book takes place in the year, I don't know, 17 something, right? And a horrible disease strikes Mexico City, right? And they try to deal with it, but they can't because there's no cure. The only to extend life, what they have to do, or the doctors at that time, were to begin to cut limbs and so forth to extend the life, right? But the second part takes place in the year about 1970 or so. I think that was um, what is it? Uh, what AIDS started coming in at a particular time, and it's the same situation. The doctors don't know what to do with it, and so forth, right? So that's what the second story is about. The third book is in the future, and things have happened. The climate change has really corrupted the ocean, has created all sorts of different bacteria that we never even heard of, and they penetrate the sand and rise up in different places as smoke or as gas and infect people. Right. So doctors again can't deal with that particular thing, but that points to the future. It points to the future. And let's see what I think. Those are some of my books. Others are, I think, pretty interesting, but I can't talk about a lot of them, all of them. But let me just tell you a little bit about my the book that we're publishing now. Okay, that I'm publishing now, and so that book's entitled "Place of the White Heron," and it's a book about an Ilusa, right? And Ilusa in the 16th, 17th century were women, or Ilusas, were women who lost the protection of their fathers, brothers, husbands, and the church, and the family. They were thrown out into the street as degraded women, as women that were not holy anymore in reference to the church. But they began to follow the mystic nuns, and the nuns would perform, miracles, would perform healings, would perform all different types of things, to get attention and to get a following and people in the church. Well, this woman is very wealthy, comes from a very wealthy family. I can't give you all the details. Very wealthy family, highly educated individual, right? And but is kicked out of Mexico. They took her out because they thought she was in danger for her life. No, so but it's an exciting book, and it covers a lot of issues that Mexico is going through, and so forth. My last statement here would be that this character points to the future and what's happening in medicine today at UCI and at UC Merced and at other campuses in UCI and campuses throughout the United States. They have programs now that are inclusive. It's called integrative medicine. I think it is, or integrated medicine, in which you consider a lot of the ways of teaching of communities that have just come from abroad, from Mexico, from China, et cetera, et cetera. So these clinics is a beautiful building, $10 million to build this building of integrative medicine at UCI. So they train doctors to specifically work in those areas. At UCI, you have Prime LC, a primary doctor, a general doctor, right, working in LC, Latino communities. So it's a whole new vision of what the future holds in medicine and technology and so forth, right? Because I find that's very fascinating. My last statement is I like to talk about the future, but I don't have any time. I like to talk about the future about Mexico and the United States. You get a lot of nasty, propaganda about that. My vision of that is very positive. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Hello.
Margarita and Nizar.
I don't know if we were introduced or if you know anything about us. I was not here at the beginning. I apologize. I was told 4:30, so I was early. Um, Alejandro was my mentor at UC Irvine when I did my grad school, my PhD.
And your name is?
Margarita Lopez Lopez. Okay. And many years have passed, and now I have the pleasure to be collaborating with Alejandro in regards to his publications, editing, translation, whatever's required, right? And I'm retired. I did teach at California State University, Channel Islands, my last university. Before that, I was in many other places. Today, I have the pleasure, along with Nizar, and he can introduce himself.
A brief introduction to me. My name is Nizar Ayanovich. I'm a friend of the bookstore, friend of Alejandro's, and I'll be assisting in reading the English portion of his poem.
Are you also a friend of Margarita?
Yes, a friend of Margarita's.
He's also a friend of mine. And I think he has a beautiful dog, right, Nizar?
A dog, you said?
Didn't you bring a dog?
It was not my dog. I don't know.
Okay, then. Well, I
Might have been
remember.
beautiful, though.
Oh, okay, okay. Anyway, so yes, we met before here. And today I do have a pleasure of reading one of those poems that I translated from Spanish into English. Of course, I'll be doing the Spanish reading. I hope that you can follow. If not, no problem. We have an English as well. Oh, now what we will be reading is only a few sections of the poem. This poem is quite long. It's not a few stanzas. It's more of a 30 something, almost 40 pages long. And the name of the poem is El Poema de Cuba, translated into
Cuba's poem.
the topic of Alejandro's chat, as he told me, is characters looking for an author. So when I selected the readings, that's what I was thinking of, the characters looking for an author. So when you listen, you can imagine all these characters from these sections looking for someone to write about them. Okay? And Alejandro did. Okay, I will read Spanish, and then Isar will read the English, and we'll go back and forth. The first reading is called El pecado del turismo. En el Hotel Nacional, tú eres de Italia, Canadá, España, Alemania. Los empleados te reciben con regocijo. Meseros, recepcionistas, agentes de viajes, camareras, cocineros, taxistas, porteros. Puestos cotizadísimos relacionados con el turismo pagan más que a un cirujano, que a un profesor. Para hacer un nuevo mundo, las fuerzas de las masas resisten el imperialismo y su condena del maldito bloqueo, que mantiene al cubano entre el hambre y la insegura ración de trocitos de carne, migas de pan, que les provee la victoria. Cuba tiene una miseria generalizada.
In English, tourism sin. At the Hotel Nacional, you are from Italy, Canada, Spain, Germany. The employees greet you with delight. Waiters, receptionists, travel agents, chambermaids, cooks, taxi drivers, porters, highly coveted positions related to tourism. Pay better than a surgeon, than a professor, to make a new world the strength of the masses, resist imperialism and the doom of its damn embargo that keeps Cubans between hunger and the uncertain. Ration of pieces of meat, breadcrumbs, that victory provides them. Cuba's widespread misery.
Italiano de 60 años, con tu Marta de 20, sentadita en tus piernas, a tu joven querida le muestras cómo quieres que te acaricie. Al principio se resiste. Le das un ron y se anima, como una promesa revolucionaria.
Italian of 60 years with your Marta of 20, sitting cute on your lap, you show your young sweetheart how you wish to be caressed. At first, she resists. You give her rum and she feels willing, as a revolutionary promise.
Por la mañana, como antes, le haces cariños y bajan a desayunar el gran breakfast del Hotel Nacional, donde te sientes cómodo, rodeado por otros con sus jóvenes, herederos de la patria, infantes de la revolución. Tu muchacha come voraz, huevos, salchichas, omelete, jamón, pan dulce, mantequilla, mucha mantequilla, jugo, café, fruta. Estará creciendo, piensas. Conversaciones a tu alrededor se quejan en inglés. Shouldn't be allowed in this hotel. God, how old is he? She looks 16.
In the morning, as lovers, you caress her and both go downstairs to the grand breakfast at the Hotel Nacional, where you feel comfortable, surrounded by others, with their young heirs of the motherland, infants of the revolution. Your girl eats voraciously eggs, sausages, omelet, ham, sweetbread, butter, lots of butter, juice, coffee, fruit. She must still be growing, you think. Conversations around you complain in English. Shouldn't be allowed in this hotel. God, how old is she? She looks 16.
This is a second reading. Los capitalistas. El 85% de cubanos en Estados Unidos mandan remesas a sus parientes, pero Cuba les rebaja 50% en impuestos y servicios. Yo no puedo salir de Cuba. La sección de intereses norteamericana me niega la visa de turista. Soy muy joven. Si tuviera 60 años, sí me dejarían. Los profesionistas salen por intereses económicos. Te explica un taxista.
The capitalists. 85% of Cubans in the United States send money to their relatives, but now Cuba takes 50% for taxes and services. I cannot leave Cuba. The United States interest section denies me a tourist visa. I'm too young. If I were 60, they would let me. Professionals leave for economic interests, explains a taxi driver.
Hay más de 1 millón de cubanos en La Yuma. Tengo familia en Union City. Te cuenta un vendedor de refrescos. Mis hijos viven en California. Saca una libreta de direcciones. Te muestra la de su hija que vive en Downey.
There are more than 1 million Cubans in La Yuma. I have family in Union City, a soda vendor confides. My children live in California. He takes out an address book, shows you his daughter lives in Downey.
¿Comprar coche? Hay que tener autorización. Está limitado a poca gente, te indica un estudiante. Campesinos que reciben remesas de La Yuma pueden tener sus propias parcelas. Te explica un señor saboreándose un mojito en la bodeguita del medio.
Buy a car? One must have a permit. It is limited to few people, a student points out. Campesinos who receive money from relatives in La Yuma can afford their own plots, a man tells you while savoring a mojito at the bodeguita del medio.
Los parientes en Miami o donde sea que se encuentren en La Yuma ya no quieren mantener a la familia en La Habana. Les cuesta demasiado. La Yuma no quiere negros, mulatos, mestizos, razas híbridas de México, Centroamérica, Sudamérica, el Caribe. El enemigo prefiere que lleguen los blancos para hacer una limpia de la sangre nacional.
Relatives in Miami, or wherever they may be in La Yuma, no longer want to support their families in Havana. It costs too much. La Yuma does not want blacks, mulattos, mestizos, hybrid races from Mexico, Central America, South America, the Caribbean. The enemy prefers whites to settle and do a cleansing of the nation's blood.
La Yuma is the United States. It's just in Cuba. Okay? That's what they call La Yuma. Not Yuma, Arizona. Another Yuma. A bigger Yuma. Third reading. La belleza explotada. Marta, sentada en un taburete, por un instante gozas de su belleza. Deslizas los dedos por el cabello rubio rojizo. Detienes la mano en su nuca. Despacito recorres la espalda esbelta hasta descansar sobre su cadera. Notas que otros la desean, que otras comentan su belleza.
Beauty exploited. Marta on a stool for an instant. You delight in her beauty. Your fingers comb through her reddish blonde hair. Your hand stops at her nape, then softly caress her slender back until resting on her hip. You notice other men lust over her. Women comment on her beauty.
En la tarde, salen a la piscina del Hotel Nacional. Sentados frente al bar, qué buen servicio ofrece Cuba revolucionaria. Marta sale del agua, Cuerpo radiante, gotas de agua resbalan por los divinos brazos, abdomen, piernas, carnes sólidas, ninfa moderna cubana secándose al sol.
In the afternoon, you both go in the pool at the Hotel Nacional and sit in front of the bar. Such good service revolutionary Cuba provides. Marta comes out of the water, radiant body, water droplets slide down her heavenly arms, abdomen, legs, firm flesh, modern Cuban nymph drying in the sun.
Por la plaza de armas, la plaza de la catedral, en el restaurante El Patio, sutilmente le sobas un pecho. Por primera vez se queja. ¡Hay niños! Pues, ¿qué importa? Unos güeros notan tu molestia. Ella acaricia la idea que su extranjero salvador la saque de la isla contenta, casada, ilusionada. Se bebe el segundo whisky.
At the Plaza de Armas, the cathedral square, and the restaurant El Patio, you fondle her breast subtly for the first time. She complains. There are children present. So, what does it matter? Sangüeros notice your annoyance. She cherishes the idea of her foreign savior taking her away from the island, happy, married, illusioned. She drinks her second whiskey.
And this is the last reading. Señora delgadísima. En Cuba todo se hace por la revolución. Tantos años que vienes a Cuba, no ha mejorado la vida diaria. La comida se distribuye en raciones. Lo necesario para sobrevivir se encuentran tiendas para el pueblo. Los hospitales, las clínicas han empeorado. Al principio, los servicios médicos para toda la población es uno de los grandes triunfos. Desde la huida de los rusos, los servicios están jodidos. Lo que ha mejorado es la juventud exótica que te consiguen los agentes de turismo.
Emaciated lady. In Cuba, everything is done for the revolution. So many years you visit Cuba, daily life is not improved, food is distributed in rations. What is needed to survive is found in stores for the pueblo. The hospitals, the clinics are worse at first. Medical services for the entire population is one of the great victories since the Russians fled. Services are screwed. What is improved are the exotic young you can get through tourist agents.
Tu anfitrión tiene a su madre con él, una señora delgadísima, de 89 años, en medio de 4 paredes, sentada en el sofá. Cuenta que su madre apenas come. Esa mujer es metáfora de los servicios médicos. Un sistema antiguo que poco a poco se desnutre del interés por vivir. La pobre vieja se queda sentada inactiva. Marta te reafirma, los cubanos merecemos algo mejor.
Your host has his mother with him, a scrawny lady of 89 years within 4 walls, sitting on the sofa. He says his mother barely eats, that woman is the metaphor of the medical services and old system. Little by little, she is starved of any interest to live. The poor old woman remains sitting idle. Marta reaffirms to you, we Cubans deserve better.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We have a little time for Q&A, please. Preguntas, comentarios.
Recently, I have read some books, interesting books, one of which is called The Last Day of the Dinosaurs. And in there, for the last day of the dinosaurs, it's described as creating chaos all over our planet Earth. Destroy the weather, destroy the plants, destroy the animals, destroy everything. I don't know whether that idea, I think it touched upon that itself when you were talking about.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I don't have these disastrous visions of the future. No, I don't know whether that's going to happen. What you described as far as the environment and so forth. I think slowly we have to really find a way to try to solve all of those problems. And I have hope that we might be able to solve some of them. But I don't know whether we'll be able to solve the issues of the oceans, because of all the climate change up in the north that's melting all these ice, the icebreakers that they have there. But I do think that in the future, we're going to have technology that's going to be able to make our lives longer, and there's a lot of work being done, for example, in transplants, not human to human, but animals to humans. And I think that that's going to be something that's going to prolong our lives. Now, I believe that also artificial intelligence, we have to be very careful with it. It is dangerous, but I think it's going to answer a lot of questions for us in the future. In fact, artificial intelligence, is dangerous in the way that it is able to correct itself. It's able to correct or to make another computer or program better than itself, right? And that's the danger. The book I'm reading right now is the last invention, which is the idea of singularity. And singularity means what? You build one computer, that computer eventually will be able to build itself, right, through artificial intelligence, right? But that's the danger, But nonetheless, let me just tell you quickly about what I see of the trans border, what I call the trans border, and that's 300 miles north, 400 miles north, or 400 miles south of the U.S. Mexican border. I believe that's gonna change. The cities in that area, Hermosillo, what else? All these other cities that we have there, those are gonna develop, right? And as far as migration is concerned, less and less Mexicans are coming to the United States. Right now, the migration is coming from the Caribbean and Central America, but in the future, it's going to be less. Why? Because people will be able, Mexico City was kind of like a transit place to go from there first and then to the border, right? Or then Guadalajara. But now they're going to be going to Hermosillo, all these other cities that are 300-400 miles south of the U.S. Mexican border, because that they're going to develop. The other thing is we're going to bring more water to that northern part of Mexico, right? And it's going to be done. Some people don't like what I'm going to say. It's going to be done by salt, by desalinization plants. We have them already. Mexico has them already going. Also, electricity. Mexico is farming electricity. Right? They can produce more electricity. The Texas governor refuses to connect to, and Mexico has offered to send electric north, but he says no, porque es francamente un racista, no? But I see also huge cities, or I say towns, that are dedicated to older folks, right? Many people are not going to be living in older homes here because they want $1 million to get into these places, right? They're going to go to Mexico because in Mexico they're going to have beautiful. They already have them. San Luis Potosí, other places like that have those, right? San Miguel de Allende has those already, but living in these cities, 400 miles south, right? They're closer to Houston. They're closer to the U.S. if you need an operation or really serious situations. But migration is going to go south, and there's going to be elderly people going south to Mexico. So it has a lot of possibilities, right? That's why I see this more positive future in Mexico and the United States, and collaboration between the two countries. George Bush, and then I'll be quiet here. George Bush's son, he and Vicente Fox and the Canadian Prime Minister during the time of the Bush administration, they had this really developed plan between Mexico and the United States to make three countries as a union, right? But Congress, after about 3 years of that, and all these presidents met and they discussed that. They developed economic plans. They developed all sorts of plans. Developed roads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that thinking is happening, And eventually I think it's going to happen. We will, think of economics. How many millions and millions and millions of dollars are Mexicans sending home to Mexico? Millions and millions, and si no billones eventually, right? So, every single day, you can't shut down the border because you have millions and millions of dollars going back and forth every single day, not just in funds and money, but in trucks. You ever gone to Laredo and seen those trucks just come and come and come and come, and trucks going south, south, south? There's a lot of building cars, building chips now, right? Building chips not in China, but in Mexico. So my vision of the future will probably get some people angry, but I think, in fact, I was at UC, what is it, Mexico, University of Mexico, New Mexico, and one guy from Berkeley, and I was there, giving a series of talks, and one guy says, Alejandro, what is all this BS utopia you're thinking of? And I said, well, look at what you see every day on TV. All these crimes that are committed, people killing themselves with these huge guns and rifles and so forth. People living in the streets. Look at LA, right? So why not think utopian? Why not think that things will be better and get better? That's my, this is mi rollo, camarada. But anyway, yes.
I have a question regarding education because I teach in a school in Santa Ana that's 50% McKinney-Vento homeless and about 80% social needs.
No, no, no.
Yeah, I well, there's a lot of questions that you have there in one. Okay, but I'm going to try to answer all of them. But first of all, I want to say UC does not allow students to enter. UC accepts students who make the requirements. Okay, who qualify to be at UC. All right, those students are not there because they're allowed. They're there because they qualify to get into the University of California. Today, well, University of California, I think we talked about this earlier. They have their own plan as to how to overcome, the whole issue of race, because it happened before. It happened about, I don't know, 10 years ago. That the Forgot the name of that lawsuit. Yeah, 209, and they developed a system that allows students to talk about, if they wanted to talk about their race, to talk about where they're living, right? To talk about what contributions they can give to the school, right? And literally develop a whole argument for why being an Asian American or being an African American or somebody from the Middle East and so forth, or Mexico or whatever, why they should be there. And there's another essays. It's all in the essays, right? But they have to have a decent grade point average. It's not that they have a real bad grade point average. We're not going to let anybody in there, with a frankly a C average. That doesn't count. It doesn't work. So we have a system. It takes a long time, right, to go through thousands and thousands and thousands of these applications. But I think the UC system works. I said it earlier that in the past 3 or 4 years, the largest ethnic group to be allowed to come in, to be accepted at the University of California, happens to be, in quotes, Hispanics, Latinos, right? And these Latinos are not, wealthy kids, et cetera, et cetera. They qualify to get in there. I work with a lot of them, and they're to me fascinating kids, right? They struggle, they work hard, they study, they're getting along well. We push them into grad school. I don't want to say push. We encourage them to do well to get into graduate school. We give them money to get into graduate school. And that's the whole idea of the endowment that Rhoda and I have set up at UCI. No, that's eventually that's going to be big enough to send kids to grad school, and that's in our department. And I was one of the first people to develop, along with Maria, Chicano Latino Studies at UC Irvine. That department has grown now. We have, I think, 3 new professors already there, 2 more coming in June, and they cover all different areas. They're wonderful teachers, right? And they're scholars, and they're there to get a lot of the term Chicano kids, Latino kids, into the university. One last thing I have to say is that the populations are changing. The type of student or Latino student that we get is different now. There's a lot coming from LA, from other parts of the country, but there's a lot coming from central Mexico, which means that some of these kids are trilingual. They speak Spanish, they speak a little English, and they speak what is it, Zapoteca or Mixteco and so forth. And I went to their first meeting because they started to get together and to meet, and I was fascinated by hearing not Spanish, but them communicating in Zapoteco, whatever language that they're speaking, and also some of them spoke in English, but broken English, but they're going to learn well. They learn fast. So I have my vision is that all that we do now and we're doing now, working hard to do, it's I guess even with all the Supreme Court changes and so forth, we are going to get closer together. That's my feeling. Maybe it's really idealistic, but nonetheless, I think we're going to get closer together because of the changes that are happening, because of the changes in schools, because of teachers being trained to go teach in elementary schools, et cetera, et cetera. I feel positive about all that. That's why I still want to be in the system. I retired about 4 years ago. I think I retired. I still have my office. I still work with grad students, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I love it. I don't want to teach anymore because I got burned out a little bit, but nonetheless, I will, in emergencies, substitute for professors. Like last year, I substituted for one professor for about a week, that she was going to Mexico, so I substituted. I'll do that, and meet with students. I'm always there for when we have a meeting with inviting students to come and meet with us. We're always there. So I'm positive. I tell you, my vision of the future, Mark, is a real positive one. Unfortunately for me, but nonetheless, no, seriously, it is. Anybody else? Oh my God. Oh, what is it? What is your name? Ah. I like Carlos Fuentes a lot, right? Poniatowska a lot, you know. But I don't purposely take not always take a scene and put it into the novel. I do that though, and let me give you an example. And this is not Latin American writer. This is Beloved by Toni Morrison. When that when the girl when Beloved comes out of the river, you know, and she's struggling to get out of the river, struggling to get out of the river, can't walk, can't talk, can barely breathe, right? And then they take her home. They find that she can't eat. They have to teach her. They have to feed her. She can't speak, et cetera, et cetera. That scene to me is a powerful, powerful scene that I used in. I think. Excuse me? Oh, oh, yeah, in River of Angels. I use that scene in River of Angels, and there are and another scene is about the a city, let's say, underneath LA. There's a myth that LA was first built underground by creatures of some kind. So I use that particular scene for I think also in River of Angels. También. Yeah, I've written so many books I forgot what a lot of a lot of the stuff that's in them. But yeah, they affected me a lot. And I tell you that my first time that I met a lot of Mexican writers, particularly, was when I went and searched all over for a publishing house, and I ended up going to Joaquin Mortiz, and I thought, and that was the major publishing house of Latin America at the time, and I figured they're going to make me wait for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then oh, then I'm gone, right? But no, me trataron muy bien, and y Don Joaquin told me, uh, okay, I got your book, and this is my very first book. I'm gonna have it read, and in a month I'm gonna call you, and I'm gonna call you to come and get your book and say goodbye, or I'm gonna call you to sign a contract and have a tequila with me. And that's exactly what happened. And through that, I met all sorts of writers through that particular company, and they came to visit us and so forth. So yeah, I had a lot of influence by Latin American writers, you know, as well as Argentinos. Borges, for example, is really has helped me a lot in my writing because he deals with the future. He's a futurist. And to me, the biggest image that I got out of Borges, and I will be quiet now because I got 0 minutes, is is the whole image of El Aleph. And the Aleph is what I forgot the name of the Argentino guy looks into. He goes down to his basement, and he has Borges look down below the first step of the basement. Look, can you see it? Lo puedes ver. He's telling you, can you see it? And then Borges looks and he sees the Aleph, and the Aleph is the place where all things, all time exists. Right. So that's a powerful image, as far as I'm concerned. But Borges never tells his host that he saw it. But the fellow wanted to tell him that he saw it too. But that's but that no, it was you know, those writers really impacted me a lot. But American writers like Toni Morrison and so forth, I really enjoyed. So we're done, right? Yep, we are. I'm sorry for going over time.